I was saying that we are talking about two of my favorite subjects today, love and money. And Erica is with me. So, Erica, actually, I'll let you introduce yourself and talk about what a happiness coach does.
Yeah, absolutely. I will give a disclaimer. I'm like in the middle of like redoing my copy with Monica and kind of like transitioning this. So I would like to say, hi everyone. My name is Erika and I'm a happiness coach. Overwhelmed change makers. I help change makers overcome overwhelm all over the place. That is not how it goes. But I help people kind of build routines to figure out like how can we change our autopilot to doing the things that we want to do instead of just running on what everyone else is telling us. So
Yeah, no, I talk about that a lot with my clients. I feel that a lot of times we tend to run on autopilot until certain things hit us. And then there's
yeah.
the being forced to, shake out of it and, create plans to live the life that you actually want to live. Especially for those of you who are Erica's followers and are joining because you saw that she was live. I'm Keisha Rice, and I am a dating coach for ambitious women of faith. And, oftentimes when you talk about dating and, getting married and all of that, you see people who marriage was somewhere in the plan for them, or some type of long-term partnership was in the plan for them, but they get caught up in doing all the other things. And then they hit a certain age or they hit a certain season in life and they're like, I never devoted any time to this. What do I do right now?
Oof. Yeah. And it's all about priorities too, right? Which I feel like bleeds into everything.
Yeah. Which, kind of brings us to what we were going to talk about today, money, and how much that bleeds into your relationship. So, actually, do you have any personal reflections with that about how money has affected your relationships?
Whew. Yeah. I will say that is the chief reason, really, why my last relationship ended. My partner was so motivated to make sure that he could take care of himself and his family without any problems because his dad was in that situation where it didn't make sense for his mom to continue working, so his mom just stayed at home, which put a lot of pressure on his dad to kind of be the breadwinner of the family and make enough money. And so he kind of took that belief and that paradigm into his own world, and he felt like he had to make a lot of money. And he kind of said, "You need to also make a lot of money because I don't want to be in the same position as my dad." And I just felt the scale of financial security that he wanted was unreasonable and unnecessary. And that is ultimately why my last relationship ended.
Yeah, I always tell my clients all relationships are related. And it's not just, how you feel about yourself being related to how you feel about, say, spirituality or your relationship with your parents or, um, your relationship with your friends or, romantic partners and all. But also, money is a relationship too. And, I think about when I started to get my love life together, after being in some abusive relationships and everything, and I also started to get my financial story together, there were a lot of things colliding with that, like because
Yeah.
I had low self-esteem, I was screwing up money wise because I was spending money to make myself feel better about certain things.
Yeah.
Or because, I didn't love myself, I'd get into relationships and I felt that I had to give in order to be loved, in order to be accepted. And, that goes with, of course, time giving, but it also, becomes a money thing too. And you end up pouring so much money into getting someone gifts or doing things for them, or even, making yourself look nicer, dressing a certain way and wearing expensive clothes to be accepted. And, a lot of times we don't realize that these money habits flow out of, this need to make ourselves look better, make ourselves seem better. Um, they say money doesn't buy happiness, but, a lot of times that's what people are trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes so deep because a lot of the times we're just looking for this validation, right?
Yeah.
And when we're doing it for ourselves, sometimes it doesn't feel like it's enough, or it feels like it's cheesy, or they say like fake it till you make it, and it just doesn't feel genuine. And I think I have mixed feelings about that statement, like fake it till you make it, because it's like I feel like that's how it goes. Like you imagine and you visualize and you create that space that you want and you put yourself there, even if it's only in your head, right? And then once you can visualize it and you understand what you want, then you can start materializing it and making it real, which is like the whole fake it till you make it, right? But I think there's so much stigma and people think, oh, you're still fake. And there's like, people don't want to do that because there's stigma against it. And in reality, like that's how you get there. Like you need to know what you want and you need to know what it feels like. And I think in your brain, you don't even understand the difference. Like when you have those visualizations and you start smiling because you get to have your like chocolate chip ice cream cake and you're like able to go outside and sit in the sun, right? You're like glowing with enthusiasm and excitement and joy, and it's real, right? Even if you don't have that cake, even if you're not outside, right? You can't, your brain doesn't know the difference.
Yeah, really true. And I talk more often about face it till you make it.
Hmm. Tell me
So
more.
so what I mean by that is you're going through difficult situations and you can't be like, oh, this doesn't exist. I'm going to act like it doesn't exist. But at the same time, we have to be
Hmm.
practical about certain things. Like you can't be facing a personal crisis and you're going to work and you go into work every day walking through the door
Hmm.
crying and sobbing. Like you have to put on some sort of at least a neutral face, if not a smiling face, and like get through that workday. And,
Yeah.
and you also have this idea of where you want to go destination wise, and you have to face that too, because it's not just the visualization of like, oh my goodness, it's going to be so great when this thing happens, but it's how do I get to these things? When we talk about our relationships with, people and entering into a romantic relationship, you can't just imagine the partner. Part of attracting who you want is, are you those things that you're asking for? Or
Yes.
are you at least complimentary to the things that you're asking for?
So
So,
much.
so part of fixing that and imagining that perfect partner and what you want is like, okay, well, can I contribute those same things, or do I contribute something that is a complement to that? Like, you know, you think typical heterosexual relationships, man's provider and all that traditional role. Well, if you're thinking that, then you're supposed to be, as a woman, the nurturing
Yeah.
side of that. If you want someone who is, we were talking about money and all, if you want someone who is financially stable, can you also take care of money? Because no one wants a partner who they've worked hard to get financially stable, and this person is going to come in and drain their bank account. Like,
It's funny that you say that because it's like literally winning the lottery, right? When you have like a sugar mama or sugar daddy, right? If it doesn't matter if you don't know how to handle your finances when money comes into your life, it's not going to be like, oh, you magically know how to handle finances now, right? And it's like understanding what you have when you're in your position, like you said, like being able to offer what you're asking for. Because if you're like, I want this person to be tall, dark, and handsome, make a six-figure salary, and like have a house, and I'm just going to show up and be happy, right? It's like, okay, like that's great. Like you need to know what you're bringing also to the table, and that it feels equal. Because I think that's a big thing in relationships too. Is that's when it doesn't work out. Is like when it feels like it's a one-sided relationship.
yeah, and we talk about money mindset and everything, and I think it's so important in relationships to have your money mindset together, because at the end of the day, money is a tool. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it is a thing that in Western society is a necessity. That's how we get the things that we want, is by using money. So we
Yeah.
have to learn to live with it. And
Yeah.
you think about all the ways that goes into your relationships. Like, I think of growing up, my parents making statements like money doesn't grow on trees. And you have this whole scarcity mindset about money. And you don't realize that scarcity mindset starts to bleed into other things too. Like, I'm looking for a job. Oh my goodness, all these people are applying. I'm never going to get it. Or I'm trying to get into this college and so many people are applying and I'm never going to get it. Or you put yourself out in the dating pool and you're starting to do math. You're starting to go on Google and Google yourself out of dating because you're like, These are the statistics about like how many single men are in the city and how many single women are in the city. And, that one sense of scarcity starts to beget all these other senses of scarcity.
Yeah, and I always say it's like the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And so like if you're doing one thing in your relationship, it's probably affecting both your time, your money, your general lifestyle, right? Like it's gonna be the same. And sometimes people are like a little bit in denial and they're like, no, like I'm good about my money here, but then I keep that separate. And it's like it comes from a core belief, right? Like something that deep down is like inside of you and you've learned that from somewhere, right? Whether you are aware of that or not, your programming came from somewhere, whether that was your family, your teacher, your culture, your society, wherever, like it comes from somewhere.
Yeah, and you especially think of like your childhood and like how money came into play and things like that, and then how it starts to play in your adult relationships as well. I can think of, my parents both came from very, poorer backgrounds and all that, and they worked very hard to get to middle class. You know what I mean? So when they had kids, they really wanted to make sure that their kids got all the things that they couldn't get.
Yeah.
That's how they saw work, was we work hard, we work these long hours so that we earn more money, and with the more money we can give our kids the things that we didn't get. And I remember as a child, things like my dad would work a really long day and he would come home and I'd ask to play with him and he'd say, "Not now, I'm really tired." And, I would get sad about that. And he'd be like, "Oh, she's sad." So he would go buy a doll or something like that, be like, "I'm sorry, here you go." And, from his point of view, he grew up poor. There's no way that his parents could have done that. There's no way that his parents could have gone and gotten him a toy when he was upset. So this was the American dream for him.
Yeah, to be
Yeah.
it,
And I realized, like, I didn't think that that affected me until I met my now husband. But, our first couple of dates, he would give me like gifts like flowers or things like that. He would bring them on the date. And my first reaction was to be angry and be like, "Why are you trying to buy me? What is wrong with you?" And it took me a little bit to be like, "Oh, wait, this is some programming that I have as a child that I never actually dealt with. And that this is not,
yeah.
he's trying to be nice. And I've taken it a different way because of, how I grew up."
Yeah. It's wild when you told that, like telling that story of your experience, because I'm like, me too. Like that's essentially the same experience I went through. Like my dad was so busy working all the time. It was like a 2 hour commute. And so he was just never home. And like when he was home, he was sleeping because he was so tired because he had to make sure there was like food on the table and all of that. And so he'd go to like the Sanrio, like the Hello Kitty shop, and he'd get me those little surprise bags. And I was like, this is not enough. Like I don't want like stickers. I want time with my father. And like I think it also goes to like this piece of this assumption, right? Where our parents often are doing things for us because they assume it's what we want, and sometimes it's not. And there's just like this difference in like values, right? And we're in a different position, and like I think sometimes there's this privilege that we take for granted, or we don't even recognize that like when our parents grew up poor, they didn't have access to all these things, and it's just kind of like we accept as like the norm. And so they sometimes will get frustrated with us, like, how are you doing that? Why are you wasting your money on coaching or personal development? Like you should be buying food or like buying a house. And it's like we're in kind of like a different reality at this point.
Yeah, it's like, what is Maslow, like the hierarchy of needs?
Yeah.
Those of us who were privileged to, in our childhood, have all those basic needs cared for, we look at money differently from those who didn't have all those needs cared for. And, that's not a good or a bad thing. But if you're unaware of how you've been programmed, if you're unaware of like what your values are when it comes to money, you get into these situations, like I said, when I met my husband and everything, where because I grew up in a family where my parents worked so many long hours and gave gifts, so I value time so much, you know, he grew up in an environment where like buying gifts and putting a lot of effort into that meant a lot more, like scarce money and all of that.
Yeah.
So, we came at things from different points of view, and without actually being able, without having talked those things out, you're looking at a relationship ending over something that's just a simple misunderstanding.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is so huge, that awareness and understanding where the action is like actually rooted in, right? It's like, I just wanted to buy you flowers because I thought it'd be nice. And like, we both have different perceptions of what that means to get flowers, right? And then like being able to trace that back and understand like where it's coming from and what it means, and then to name it and talk about it, which I think is there's like so many layers there. It just often gets lost in the shuffle, and then there's a fight, and then the relationship ends.
Right, because you and I grew up in environments where getting a gift was a sign of there being something wrong in a sense. Like, we're getting a gift because you're going to be working overtime this weekend, and I'm not going to see you, and I'm going to spend the weekend at grandma's house. Like,
Yeah, like it's compensating. It was like a signal.
yeah.
Oof.
But also like understanding how that affects into how like money affects certain other people pleasing behaviors too. Like, I alluded to that before. When you are a high achiever and you feel like you have to get things perfectly, or when you grew up being neglected, or not a lot of attention was paid to you, and now you're always trying to earn people's love and trust and all that. It's not just time. I have definitely had clients of mine who will talk about past relationships of theirs where they didn't think anything of it at the time. Like, they were just trying to make, I work with women. So they were just trying to make the guy that they were with happy or whatever. And then they get into a relationship. They're into a relationship for, 9 months, a year, whatever. And they get out of the relationship and start looking at their credit card statements and realize, like, one gift here, two gifts there is $300 or $400 here, $1,000 there, and they've ended this relationship both heartbroken and broke.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I'll say is on the money side of that is like you come in and you have these values, right? And we often spend our money based on what's important to us, right? And so I would examine that in that situation, that being in a relationship and having a partner that we've connected with is probably a value, a priority for those people. And again, that often was probably not the situation, that there was an imbalance, that it was on like one side, right? And so again, to just bring awareness and to know, sorry, I wanted to spend like this much money on my partner, and I want to do it with intention, right? And understanding that there's a budget and not just going off the wall because, well, for multiple reasons, right? Like if you're trying to compensate for something, or if you're just kind of getting carried away with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that sometimes comes to a values thing, because some people are like, I can say this for myself. I value quality time more than anything else, quality time with the people in my life that I love. So sometimes you don't think about that. You're like, oh, my niece or my nephew wants to go to this place or whatever, and I just want to spend the day with them. This will be a great opportunity to spend the day with them. Let's go do it. And
Yeah.
then it's not until you start getting really aware about like the things that, of course, like a 10-year-old kid asks for tend to cost a lot of money.
Yeah. When you get to the theme park and all that, oh gosh.
Yeah, then you have to learn that, like, in that particular example, it's also a matter of learning that as an adult, I'm setting an example for them too. So I have to get my own money things together and my own money mindset and all. And I also need to model for them that there are plenty of ways that we can have a good time that, doesn't cost a lot of money.
Yeah. And I think that's another huge thing, is that we learn this like financial programming usually from our parents, because it's not really taught in schools. It's not really taught anywhere else unless you're very proactively seeking it in college. Like there's not really a lot of resources that are obligatory or that are like required for us to learn about money. And so um, we learn just by modeling, like even if our parents intended to or not, like they passed on their money habits to us.
Yeah, and also, like, I think it's important to keep that in mind, that, like, I was just having a discussion with my mom the other day, and we're talking about generational curses and generational blessings. And, I was talking about the fact that, yes, it is okay to blame your parents for certain things. But at a certain point, you become grown. And
It's no longer, it's not an excuse.
right. The blame is there. Like, I can say this for mom and I talk about it all the time. She's a workaholic and I am too. I can totally blame her from that. Like, the apple does not fall far from the tree. But as an adult, it's my responsibility to take accountability for it.
Mm.
And to understand that, at some point I have to tell myself to sit my behind down. I have to tell myself to take days off. I have to tell myself to rest. That, you know, definitely she's not going to do it for me because it's ingrained in her. But nobody
Yeah.
else is going to do that for me either. That I have to learn how to take responsibility for that. And, I think a lot of people don't understand that. I think you would agree with me. That is where happiness actually begins, when you start accepting that, hey, like, I'm accountable for my own habits and everything. And in a way that sucks, because if I haven't fixed this, then, that's on me. But on the other hand, like, I have the power to fix this.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's another huge thing too, is that this implicit modeling that we see is, if we don't know that there's an alternate reality, if we don't know there's another way of doing things, our world exists in what we've known, right? And so if we don't know that you can be wealthy and a good person, if we don't know that you can spend money
Yeah.
and still like have enough money like for other things and have savings and all that, like, you just don't know, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know. And so to break that curse, or to shift our mindset and our habits and all of that, we need to have a model. We need to have exposure to another way, which often is not happening.
Yeah. No, I can say with a lot of my clients, they've been exposed to struggle love. So, there's this whole idea of, you meet someone and, you are, the relationship is constantly you proving what you bring to the table. You constantly proving that you love this person. So it doesn't matter how bad his behavior is. You're constantly like, oh, he didn't mean it. He was just having a bad
Justifying.
day. So you put up with, his BS and all, but also, you know, you work longer hours, you work the harder job and all that, and you're paying the majority of the bills. And not only are you paying the majority of the bills, but you're doing the cooking and cleaning and all of that. And this whole idea of, like, proving that you're worth it to the person, at what cost? Like, what is the trophy? The trophy is a Dusty who's not doing anything.
And I think that's another piece too, is like, there's this optimism,
Yeah.
right? It's like, it's just for now, like, it's going to change. Like, he promised me, like, because I also was in one of those relationships where, like, I kept trying to make excuses and empathize and understand like where my partner was coming from at the time. And at the end of the day, it's like, it's not going to end. Like, you keep being really optimistic and hopeful. And I think there's a lot of people like me, like, you just want the cup to always be half full, and it is only half full, right? Like, you can't make it any more full than it is.
Yeah.
And so you
Yeah.
have to be able to acknowledge that and accept that this is reality.
Yeah. And accepting that you can't make someone appreciate you by giving them more of what they're not already appreciating. You know,
Yeah.
like, if you're giving your all to someone and they're already taking advantage of it, you can't keep giving more, and then they'll be like one day, oh wait, like, I've been taking advantage of this person for years, but now let me stop. I actually see it. Like, that may happen, but you and I both know that the chances of that actually happening are not that great.
Yeah. Especially over time, especially as it keeps going, it becomes less and less likely, because we like literally groove. We're building habits, right? And especially when it's
Yeah.
involving another person, once it's happened for so long, that's just how it is, right? And so it's very unlikely that that behavior is going to shift.
Yeah, and that's why it takes so much of us making our own shifts. Like, when I was talking about struggle of, like, there there are people out there who don't see a problem with it because that's the exact same type of relationship their parents had. and that their aunts and uncles have, and that the other people in their community have that relationship.
Yeah.
So it's normal to them. Yeah, normal. And this is one of those things where in the past year, because of different events in the news and all that, we've gotten so big on diversity and like making our lives more diverse, and every company and its mama is trying to show that like we love all the people, and we've been knowing about all these issues forever. um but like it's important to have that diversity of thought too in what you surround yourself with, uh
Yeah.
and having friends who know more than you do about whatever the thing is. I have friends who know a little bit less about money than I do, so I try to explain to them what I know. And I have friends who know more about money than I do, so I try to learn from them as much as I can. Being a dating coach and being someone who, I've been married for 2 years, like obviously I help women who, have not gotten married yet, but I also keep women in my life who've been married for longer than I have, because I know that, there are things that are coming down the road for me that they've already been through. Um, and even on like our social media, like making sure that you surround yourself with accounts where you're actually learning from them and getting inspired by them and things like that. Having that diversity of thought, of opinion, of experience is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. And it's so interesting as you say that, because it reminds me of like this, the lift as you climb element, right? And it's like you only have to be one step up to really help everyone else, right? And so even though we're trying to make our way as we go, it doesn't matter where you are. There's always someone you can help, and there's also always someone that can help you. So understanding that and making the most of what it is, and on the other side, not feeling guilty that you're not carrying 1 million people with you as you're trying to like climb this rickety ladder that's probably hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, and I brought up social media because that's one of those things that I hear a lot is people say, well, I can't get my love life together because I come from a family where everybody's divorced or no one's ever gotten married, or everyone is in abusive relationships. I've never seen what a healthy relationship looks like except for what I think I see on TV. Or with money, everybody in my family is broke. Everybody works, 9 to 5 minimum wage jobs, and I don't know what it looks like to build wealth. One of the great things about this time that we live in is that, yes, there are times that social media can be the absolute worst, but there are also so many resources out there to help you learn, to help you model the types of behaviors that you want to see, to help you accomplish the goals that you want to have. Like I even think of my whole like journey of going from being in abusive relationships to healthy ones. My parents have been married for 38 years now. So, yes, I did have my parents to look up to. But at the
Yeah.
same time, you know how you reach that point in your life where you don't want to look up to your parents. They're not cool and all that. And
You know too much.
yeah, but so for me, that was one of those things was like filling my Facebook feed and my Instagram feed with happy couples. Like as I started going through that journey, making sure that I was following couples who seemed to have the relationships that I wanted to have, and staying my behind off like celebrity gossip sites that like to play up divorces and stuff like that.
And as you said that, it made me think of this. They say like you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So like there's a new quote, or there should be a new quote now, that you're like the average of the 3,000 like social media accounts that you follow, right? And
Yeah.
this whole idea where sometimes we're looking at our feed and we get so like frustrated, like, oh, this guy keeps complaining, blah blah blah, I hate him, blah blah. It's okay, go unfollow them if you really are bothered at all. It doesn't even have to be like
Yeah.
extreme. Like if you don't like what they're posting, like you can unfollow them. It doesn't have to be like a big deal, and like you can control it. And the other piece of that is social media is just like money. It's a tool. It's not good or bad, right? I think a lot of, well, capitalism, another thing, but like in the society and the structure that we're in, we need to get money to survive. Your money, your food costs money, your house costs money, your electricity, your Wi-Fi, your phone, everything costs money. And so because of the world we live in, we do need to have business and make money. It's, I think I was at my friend's, I was with a friend yesterday and he was talking about like coming from the environmental aspect, like people always, it's very common in environmentalism to like hate business. But like at the end of the day, it's like even environmentalists need to make money and live. And even if it's not currency, like a dollar, like there's still an exchange of value. Like there's still something there that we can survive off of.
Yeah, and I firmly believe the only way to fight bad people with insert the thing is good people with insert the thing. So uh only way
Well
to
said.
fight bad people with money is to have good people with money. Like on a very practical aspect, you think about politics, and those candidates need money to run their campaigns.
Yeah.
So if you have good people go into politics, but they can't get anywhere because there's no one giving them the money and they constantly get outspent by bad people,
Yeah.
like, you need that. Even when it comes to, relationships and again, talking about social media, the only way to fight bad social media is good social media. So, when you talk about unfollow and all that, and I love now that Facebook and Instagram have unfollow and mute so that, you don't even have, like, the person doesn't even have to know that you're
No. Yeah.
friends with them. You could just do it quietly. No need to make that big public announcement that some people like to make sometimes. Uh,
Yeah.
but you can fight all of those annoying accounts on social media. You can fight the people from your high school who get on your last nerves because all they ever do is complain by friending and following people who talk about positive stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting as we talk about this because it's also this other piece where it reminds me of like toxic positivity, right? It's like if I just follow all the good accounts, like that'll make me feel fulfilled and I'll be happy. And it's like at the end of the day, that happiness does have to come intrinsically, right? It can't be all external. It can't just be on social media. It can't just be your partner. It needs to be within you. And then that value system to be reflected in your actions and how you see the world.
Oh yeah, that is why I mean, you and I are both coaches, so obviously we're fans of coaching. But I'm also a fan of like therapists as well. Um, and anything that you need to have in order to do that inner work. But I do also think that because we live in a world where we spend so much time on social media, that is a part of it.
Yeah.
Um, I do think that, combing through your friends in real life and figuring out who you need to spend more time with and who you need to spend less time with is also a part of it. All of that comes down to normalizing the life that you want to have.
Yeah. And you have to know what it is to make it normalized.
Yeah.
So,
I was just looking through the comments. Hey, Bree. Um, but yeah, so let's talk about some more. Just real quick, a couple more money stories that you had and like how they affected some of your relationships. I know for me, one of those was, I went to an elementary school where, there's been so much discussion about like race again in the past year or so. I went to an elementary school that was pretty diverse as far as race goes. But then money wise, I would say that my family was like probably even middle class. We were probably one of the wealthier families in the school.
yeah.
And I remember not thinking anything of that at the time because, when you're in elementary school, you don't think about that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I went to a middle school where I was in a magnet program and it got flipped, where,
Mm.
you know, my family was probably one of the, like in the classes that I was in, my family was one of the, poorer families. And I remember even as early as middle school starting to have this inferiority complex about that, this whole idea that, you know, as adults, we can rationalize the amount of money that my family makes compared to the amount of money that so and so else's family makes has nothing to do with my worth or this person's worth.
Yeah.
But as a kid, you know, when you go to class and it's things like, you know, everyone in your class is wearing a certain brand of tennis shoes and you're not.
I was about to bring up that example.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
And it's things like when things like that come up, and then people give you like, especially, you know, I'm originally from Greenville, South Carolina, so especially when you grew up in the South, that whole, oh, bless your heart, like, oh, you don't have these? Oh, why don't you just tell your parents to go get you some? Oh, because they can't afford it? Oh, and you start to internalize that as I'm not worth as much. Not my shoes aren't worth as much as this kid's shoes are, but I specifically am not worth as much. And then you grow up and you start to take that I'm not worth as much into, you know, the people that you date. Like, you know, I, before I got married, you know, I dated all along the wealth class. You know what I mean? I dated men who were wealthy. I dated men who were middle class. I dated men who didn't have as much, and particularly dating men who like had more money than my family or who made way more than I did, feeling like I had to work harder in the relationship because I came in not being worth as much as them. And yes, literally, you know, as far as net worth goes and bank account goes, I was not worth as much as them. But but at the same time, that had nothing to do with my worth as like a partner.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's so huge. It's like going back to this whole extrinsic thing where we're trying to get this validation or like this comparison where we say like, okay, what are they doing? What's going on? Keeping up with the Joneses, right? And like trying to be able to justify our worth and like gain confidence through doing that. Because like you said about the shoes, it was such a big thing. Is like, I think, again, I think we're kind of having like very similar experiences as kids where we were middle class and like in my community in Pittsburgh, California, it's like a suburb, 45 minutes east of San Francisco. My phone's starting to die. But we had money, but we had enough to get by. And so I shopped at Payless. I had Airwalks, right? I always tried to get the ones
Yeah.
that looked like Nike, or I tried to get the ones that looked like Vans. And it was kind of a big deal. And I know when I got to middle school, everyone had Nikes, Converse, Vans, and I was over there with my 1999 Airwalks and whatever. And it was such a big deal. My dad, like his family's in the Philippines, he'd take these trips, and he got me these Converse. I was like, I want Converse. And if you know anything about Converse, you know the sizes are weird, right? So I was like, I wear a size
Yeah.
like 6.5 or whatever. And so he bought the size 6.5, but it was too big because it was Converse size, and they were red. And so I had these freaking like clown shoes, and I was like so determined, I'm gonna wear Converse, even though they're knockoff from the Philippines. And it was this weird thing where it's like, I need to wear a brand to fit in with my peers. And like in middle school, especially, that's like when you're doing like social circles and you're like learning like that dynamic. And so it was just, it was brutal.
And yeah, and you know, for me, it was like having that experience and then, you know, going on that whole journey to reevaluate my self-worth and understand why I was attracting so many trash relationships, because it wasn't just romantic relationships where I was attracting trash. I had a lot of trash friends too. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
The way you do one thing is the way everything happens.
Yeah. But, you know, part of that coming out of that experience made it so important to me to, once I started developing healthy relationships, to just kind of like get certain conversations out the way, to just get them off the table.
Yeah.
Like, and to be more upfront about it, because, you know, like now my husband and I regularly talk about money. We have money dates where we talk about it, and that's not sexy. Like, I'm not gonna lie. But it's important to me that we do it because the alternative is way worse, to
Yeah.
like just let things fester up and then there's this big explosion,
Yeah.
um or an implosion where you just allow yourself to get like, you go inward and you get incredibly resentful and you're not happy and the other person's over there thinking that everything's fine. And you know, even in my friendships, you know, I have no problem now with going out to restaurants and being like, you know, if I want to treat myself, I treat myself. And I pride myself in that. And, I order whatever off the menu thing I want, and I'm paying for it. It's my money. And if I'm in a season where I'm watching my budget, I have no problem being like, yo, we are not going to be splitting the tab because I'm ordering less
Yeah.
based on my budget today. The way my spending is set up today, I'm not going to be ordering like all these fine foods that I know you will be partaking in.
Yeah.
And just going ahead and like getting that off the table so that our relationship, like we have an understanding, and also I don't feel like I'm putting on a show for anyone, and I also don't feel resentful of anyone for, especially that whole restaurant situation, in general in money. We have different seasons, you have seasons where you're spending a little bit more, you have seasons where you're restricting your budget a little bit more, and I don't want anybody to feel bad about their season, and I'm not going to let anybody make me feel bad about mine.
Yeah. And just accepting it and being okay with that for sure.
Yeah. So, what would you say are some tips that you would give some people to make them happier in their relationships with money?
Yeah. So, kind of like the big three things that I'm sharing about in my workshop is like number one is like tackling that money mindset and being aware like there's fears, right? There's very real fears, and then there's like the irrational fears, right? It's like, are you able to pay your rent? Are you able to put food on your table? Are you able to put clothes on your body? Like, do you have the necessities? Back to Maslow's, right? Can you afford those things? And then looking at your priorities of like, are you spending too much money on gifts? Like, are you compromising your rent because you want to buy jewelry, or because you want to buy technology or whatever for your partner or your friends or your parents or whatever, right? And understanding where those boundaries are. The second one is just having a budget. I think a lot of the times, like you said, sometimes money is not sexy. It can be sexy, but there's like a lot of times so much stigma, and that people like feel they're being forced to figure out their budget. And in reality, like your money is going places, and you can either understand where it's going or it can just be happening, right? Which it brings back that intention and that awareness, so that it's happening on purpose, not just because I don't know, I don't know where my money went, right? And then the last one you also reference is like these money dates, right? Is like being able to have a routine where you are regularly going through your money and understanding where is it going, and are you happy with that, or do you want to change it, right? And just understanding there's no judgment there, but having a routine so you don't have to think about it, right? So usually we get paid either every month or every 2 weeks or whatever, and so that's where a lot of times it helps to uh, kind of build our routine around that when our paycheck comes in.
Yeah, money is no different than any other relationship. Like, same thing I tell my clients all the time, to check in with all their relationships with friends, family members, their partners. Are these serving you?
Yeah.
So, check in with your money. Are these current money habits serving me? Um, Spending quality time with the people in your life and letting them know that they are loved. Spending quality time with your bank account and your credit card statements, because what you appreciate appreciates. So,
I like that.
when you spend that time with your bank accounts and your credit card statements and you see where your money's going, your bank account grows because of things. You start realizing, I have a Grubhub habit that like maybe needs to calm down a little bit. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if I cook a little bit more, I could save so much and my account could grow. You know, you are building a relationship with your money just like you're building a relationship with the people in your life. So you alluded to it, but I want to make sure no one misses it. Your workshop is Wednesday, right? So give all the
There's
details. Thursday.
yeah, yeah.
Thursday,
So
how they can
uh
find out about it.
yeah, so it's this Thursday, July 8th at 5:30 p.m. PDT. And it's called Heal a Relationship with Money. We're going to work on mindset, budget, and routine. So all the things I just talked about, we'll be going through that in a lot more detail. I know Stitch Fix is a little bit, again, it's a tool, right? It gives us access to really cool clothes, and it's like being intentional and being aware of where that money is going. And so I created this workshop. I want to do a quick disclaimer. I don't have like financial certifications or proper training. It's just like I said, like being one step ahead and understanding. So I've done a lot of personal finance, like work on my own through podcasting, books, like courses in college for my family, right? And so just kind of trying to pass that on to anyone, because I know that's something that comes up for like every time I talk to clients. There's pretty much a money thing, right? Because there's an exchange of energy. And so I want to open up this like opportunity to anyone that's looking for some support with money and just understanding and having another perspective of like what money can look like. Oh,
Yeah,
and
no,
if you want to
I'm
register,
laughing over this. Two things, iPhone does let you hide apps so they're harder to find, and I have found that to be very helpful. I've also found it helpful to put certain apps in folders and name them certain things. Like I had a folder for a while that was like, "You must have money, huh?" So,
I
so
see.
if I
Calling
really
yourself
if I
out.
really
I
wanted to
like
treat
it.
myself, it did not stop me from going into said app and spending the shopping app or the Uber Eats or the Grubhub or whatever. Um, but it was also a reminder of like, do I
Yeah.
have that money? Is that a line right now?
Yeah, I love that. Again, that intentionality awareness is like another check, right? That you're not just spending it. There's actually a little notification, like, do you, not a notification, but the label on the folder, right? Do you have money for this? So that's great.
Yeah. So, Erica, thank you so much for taking this time with me. We need to do more of these.
I know we need to catch up too, just like off screen. It's still on the screen, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, still green.